The stars looked cold and distant through the observation window of the Resolute. Commander Jake Harris stood on the bridge watching his crew work at their stations. They had been out here for 3 months now, patrolling the edge of human territory. It was quiet work, mostly boring, but someone had to do it. "Coffee, sir?" Lieutenant Amy Sullivan walked up beside him, holding 2 steaming cups. "Thanks, Amy." Jake took the cup and sipped it carefully. It was hot and bitter just the way he liked it. "Anything interesting on sensors?" "Nothing yet. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before that." Amy smiled a little. "Just empty space and distant stars." Jake nodded. That was normal out here. The Terra Defense Force Alpha consisted of 5 ships, and they spent most of their time making sure nothing dangerous came near Earth's colonies. It wasn't exciting, but it was important. At the communications station, Lisa Grant was running through the usual checks. She monitored dozens of frequencies, listening for any signs of trouble. Most days she heard nothing but static and the occasional automated beacon from passing ships. Then something changed. "Wait," Lisa said, leaning forward. Her fingers moved quickly across her console. "I'm picking up something unusual." Jake set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. "What is it?" "A distress signal. It's weak, but it's definitely there." Lisa adjusted the controls, trying to clean up the signal. "It's using the old galactic emergency frequency, the one the Galactic Council gave us when we first made contact." Amy joined them, looking at the data on Lisa's screen. "Who's sending it?" "Let me see if I can get a translation." Lisa worked for another minute, her face growing more serious. "It's coming from a Velhari ship. They're calling for help." Jake felt his stomach tighten. He knew about the Velhari. They were a peaceful species, more interested in art and philosophy than weapons or war. They looked something like deer from Earth, with large, gentle eyes and soft voices. They had always been kind to humans. "What's wrong with their ship?" Jake asked. Lisa listened carefully to the message, her expression growing darker. "They're under attack. Someone is boarding them. They say they have no weapons and can't defend themselves." She paused, then added quietly, "They're asking anyone who can hear them to please help. They say the attackers are taking their children." The bridge went silent. Every crew member had heard Lisa's words. Jake could see the anger on their faces. Children. Someone was attacking a helpless ship and taking their children. "Can you identify who's attacking them?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded slowly. The Velhari identified them in their message. "It's the Kresh Dominion. They're raiders who prey on weaker species." Jake knew that name too. The Kresh were predators, both by nature and by choice. They raided peaceful civilizations, taking slaves and resources. They were strong and vicious, and they didn't care who they hurt. "Do we have coordinates?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir." The Velhari included their location in the transmission. Lisa looked up at him. "They're about 6 hours away at maximum speed." Jake turned to his second officer, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Beck, who had been listening quietly. "What do you think, Ryan?" Ryan was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes. He had been in the fleet longer than anyone else on the bridge. "The Galactic Council has rules about interfering in conflicts between other species," he said carefully. "But those rules were written by politicians, not soldiers. We're out here to protect the innocent. That's what we signed up for." "The Council might not like it if we get involved," Amy pointed out. "The Council isn't here," Ryan said firmly. "But those Velhari are. And they're dying while we debate policy." Jake looked around at his crew. He could see the determination in their eyes. Every single person on this bridge knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to help. "Lisa, send a message to the other ships in our fleet. Tell them what's happening and that we're responding to the distress call." Jake walked back to his command chair and sat down. "Amy, plot a course to those coordinates." "Maximum speed." "Yes, sir." Amy's fingers flew across her navigation controls. "Pete," Jake said, speaking into his comm unit to reach the engineering section. "I need everything you can give me. We need to get there as fast as possible." "You got it, Commander," Chief Engineer Pete Morrison responded. "I'll push these engines to the limit." The Resolute's engines hummed louder as the ship accelerated. Around them, the other 4 ships in the fleet matched their speed. The Vanguard, commanded by Captain Nick Torres, pulled up alongside them. The other 3 cruisers formed a tight formation behind. "Commander," Lisa said, "I'm still receiving the Velhari transmission. It's getting weaker." "Can you tell what's happening?" Lisa listened, and Jake could see tears forming in her eyes. "They're begging for help. They say the attackers are breaking through their last defenses. They can hear screaming in the other sections of their ship. Jake's hands gripped the arms of his chair. 6 hours. They had to travel for 6 hours while people died. It felt like torture. Sir, Amy said quietly, there's something you should know. Humans have a reputation out here. Other species call Earth a death world. I've heard that, Jake said. They say our planet is so dangerous that it made us into something terrifying. They say we're apex predators, born from a world that tried to kill us every day. Most species in the galaxy are afraid of us. But not the Velhari, Ryan added. They were never afraid of us. They always treated us with kindness and respect. Jake nodded. That was true. When humanity first joined the galactic community, most aliens had kept their distance. They looked at humans and saw predators from a nightmare world. But the Velhari had been different. They had welcomed humans, shared their art and music, and treated them as friends. Now those friends were dying and they had called for help. How long until we arrive? Jake asked. 5 hours and 40 minutes, Amy replied. It was going to be the longest wait of their lives. The crew of the Resolute worked in tense silence. Lisa kept monitoring the Velhari transmission, though it grew weaker with each passing minute. Sometimes they could hear voices in the background crying out in fear. Sometimes they heard the harsh growling sounds of the Kresh attackers. In the weapons section, Officer Dan Foster was checking every system twice. If they were going into a fight, he wanted to be ready. The Resolute carried railguns that could fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds, missile pods loaded with various warheads, and powerful plasma weapons. It was a lot of firepower, more than most alien ships carried. Down in engineering, Pete Morrison and his team were working frantically. They diverted power from non-essential systems to the engines and weapons. They checked and double-checked every connection, every power relay, every critical system. If the commander needed speed or firepower, Pete was determined to provide both. In the medical bay, Dr. Ben Carter was preparing for casualties. He had no idea what they would find when they arrived, but he wanted to be ready for anything. Nurse Kelly Wright helped him set up extra beds and organize medical supplies. Do you think we'll get there in time? Kelly asked quietly. Ben didn't answer right away. He was a doctor trained to save lives, but he was also a realist. I hope so, he finally said. But we need to be ready either way. On the bridge, Jake watched the clock count down. 5 hours, then 4, then 3. The Velhari transmission stopped completely after 3 hours. Lisa, Jake asked, though he already knew what the silence meant. Their ship's communication system has gone offline, Lisa said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the emotion underneath. I can't tell if they destroyed it or if the ship lost power. Keep trying to reach them, Jake ordered. Another 2 hours passed. The fleet raced through space, pushing their engines harder than they were meant to go. Pete Morrison worked miracles down in engineering, keeping everything running despite the strain. Finally, Amy spoke up. We're approaching the coordinates, dropping out of faster than light in 60 seconds. Jake stood up from his command chair. All ships, battle stations. Weapons hot. Shields at maximum. Everyone stay sharp. The Resolute and its sister ships dropped back into normal space. What they found waiting for them would change everything. The view on the main screen made everyone on the bridge go silent. The Velhari ship was torn apart. Large pieces of hull floated in space, spinning slowly. Atmosphere vented from dozens of holes, creating clouds of frozen gas that sparkled in the light of the distant star. Bodies drifted among the debris. The gentle deer-like forms of the Velhari floated peacefully in death, their large eyes closed forever. Oh God, Amy whispered. Jake felt sick. They had come as fast as they could, but they were still too late. Too late to save most of them anyway. Lisa, can you get me a count? Jake asked, his voice tight. Lisa worked at her console, scanning the wreckage. The Velhari ship was called the Luminous Hope. Based on its size, it probably carried about 300 passengers. I'm reading. She paused, checking her instruments again. I'm reading a lot of bodies in the debris field, sir. How many survivors? I'm detecting life signs, but they're not on the Velhari ship. They're on those. Lisa pointed at the main screen. 3 large warships orbited the wreckage like vultures circling a kill. They were ugly vessels covered in dark metal plates. Strange symbols were painted on their hulls in what looked like dried blood. Pieces of destroyed ships were welded to their armor like trophies. Kresh warships, Ryan identified them. Heavy raiders by the look of them. Each one probably carries about 200 crew and has weapons designed for boarding actions. Can you detect the Velhari survivors? Jake asked Lisa. She worked her controls carefully. Yes, sir. I'm reading about 50 life signs, all concentrated in the cargo holds of those 3 ships. The signatures are consistent with Velhari biology. She looked up at Jake with horror in her eyes. Some of the signatures are very small, Commander, children. Jake's hands curled into fists. The Kresh had taken them as slaves. He had read reports about what the Kresh did to their captives. It was not something he wanted to think about, especially when children were involved. Sensors Officer Kate Palmer spoke up from her station. Sir, I'm also detecting unusual stress patterns in those life signs. Elevated heart rates, signs of physical trauma. They're in bad shape. Dr. Ben Carter's voice came over the comm system from Medical Bay. Commander, if those people are as badly hurt as the readings suggest, we need to get them out of there quickly. Every minute counts. Before Jake could respond, the communications console beeped urgently. Incoming transmission from the Kresh ships, Lisa announced. They're hailing us. Put it through, Jake ordered. The main screen changed from the view of the wreckage to show a Kresh warrior. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall with thick scales covering his body. His eyes were yellow and cold like a reptile's. Sharp teeth filled his mouth, and when he spoke, his voice was a deep growl. Human ships. The Kresh said in broken galactic common, the language most species used for communication. You are in Kresh territory. These are our salvage rights. Leave now or face consequences. Jake stepped forward, staring at the alien on the screen. I am Commander Jake Harris of the Terran Defense Force. You're holding innocent people prisoner. Release them immediately. The Kresh warrior laughed, a horrible sound like rocks grinding together. Prisoners? These are property now. We took them in legal raid. You humans are new to Galaxy. You don't understand our ways. I understand enough, Jake said coldly. You attacked a defenseless ship and murdered innocent people. You took children as slaves. There's nothing legal about that. The Kresh stopped laughing. I am War Master Thok. I have conducted 300 successful raids. I have faced many species who tried to stop me. All failed. You humans talk much about your death world and how dangerous you are, but you are just another prey species pretending to be predators. Other Kresh warriors appeared behind Thok on the screen, all of them armed and armored. They looked at the human ships with contempt. Last warning, human, Thok growled. Leave now. These slaves belong to Kresh Dominion. If you try to take them, we will add you to our collection. Your bones will decorate our ships like the others. Jake felt a cold anger settle over him. It was different from hot rage. This was the kind of anger that made his thoughts clear and sharp. He looked at Thok and saw a creature that deserved no mercy. Let me make something clear, War Master Thok, Jake said quietly. Humanity ended slavery on our world a long time ago. We paid for that freedom in blood. Millions died to ensure that no human would ever be property again. We learned something important from that experience. What did you learn? Thok asked mockingly. We learned that slavers only understand one language. Jake's voice was ice. Release those people now or I will teach you that language. Thok laughed again and cut the transmission. The screen went back to showing the 3 Kresh warships. One of them fired a plasma bolt that streaked across space and exploded a few hundred meters in front of the Resolute. It was a warning shot. Jake turned to Amy. That answer your question? Amy's finger hovered over the weapons controls. Yes, sir. What are your orders? Jake sat back in his command chair. He opened a channel to all 5 human ships. All vessels, this is Commander Harris. Those Kresh ships are holding approximately 50 Velhari prisoners, including children. The Kresh have refused to release them and have fired upon us. We're going to get those people back. He paused, thinking about what he was about to order. The Galactic Council would probably condemn this action. Some species would call it murder. But Jake had made his choice the moment he heard that first distress call. Rules of engagement, Jake continued. The ship with the most prisoners is the priority. We disable it first, then board and rescue the hostages. The other 2 ships are to be destroyed with extreme prejudice. No survivors, no mercy, no quarter. There was a moment of silence, then Captain Nick Torres of the Vanguard responded. Confirmed, Commander. The Vanguard is ready. The other 3 ship captains echoed their readiness. Amy, split our formation, Jake ordered. The Vanguard and Resolute will take the ship with the most prisoners. The other 3 cruisers will engage the remaining Kresh vessels. Pete, I need all power to weapons and shields. You got it, Commander. Pete's voice came back immediately. Weapons are hot and ready. Dan Foster looked back from the weapons station. Sir, I have targeting solutions on all 3 Kresh ships. Railguns are loaded and missile pods are armed. Just give the word. Jake looked at the Kresh ships on the screen. They were moving into attack formation, confident in their superiority. They had raided dozens of peaceful species and never faced real resistance. They thought humans would be the same. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Kate, what are the specifications on those Kresh ships? Jake asked. Kate Palmer checked her sensors. Heavy armor plating, energy shields designed to deflect plasma and laser weapons. Each ship has multiple plasma cannons and missile launchers. They're built tough, sir, designed to take a beating. What about their shields? Any weaknesses?
Kate studied her readouts carefully.
Their shields are strong against energy weapons, but... She paused. They don't seem to be designed for kinetic impacts. Most species in the galaxy prefer energy weapons. Solid projectiles are considered primitive. Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. Good, because humanity never forgot the value of a good old-fashioned bullet. Ryan stepped up beside the command chair. Sir, once we open fire, there's no going back. The Kresh will fight to the death, and the Galactic Council will have a lot of questions. I know, Jake said. But those people down there can't wait for the Council to debate and hold meetings. They need help now. We're the only ones who answered their call. Then let's make it count, Ryan said firmly. Jake opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is your commander. In a few seconds, we're going to engage a superior force. The Kresh think we're weak because we're new to this galaxy. They think our compassion is weakness. They think we'll back down when threatened. He paused, letting his words sink in. They're about to learn what humanity is really made of. Every person on those Kresh ships chose to be a slaver. They chose to prey on the weak. They murdered innocent people and took children as property. They had their chance to surrender and they chose violence. Jake's voice grew harder. We're from Earth. Our planet tried to kill us every single day and we survived. We evolved to be hunters, fighters, and protectors. We reached the top of our food chain not because we were the biggest or the strongest, but because we were the smartest and the most determined. Today, we're going to show these raiders what it means to threaten the innocent around Deathworlders. The bridge crew was silent, but Jake could feel their determination. All ships, Jake ordered, his voice cold and final. Weapons free. Engage. The human fleet opened fire and the void erupted in violence. The Resolute's railguns fired first. These were not the elegant energy weapons that most galactic species preferred. Railguns were simple, brutal, and effective. They used magnetic acceleration to fire solid metal slugs at enormous speeds. The projectiles moved so fast they glowed white-hot from air friction. 6 slugs screamed across space toward the nearest Kresh ship at a significant fraction of light speed. Each one was about the size of a man's fist and weighed several kilograms. At that velocity, they carried devastating kinetic energy. The Kresh shields lit up as the projectiles approached. The energy barriers were designed to deflect plasma bolts and laser beams. They were very good at that job. They were completely useless against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The first slug punched through the shield as if it wasn't there. It hit the Kresh ship's armor plating and kept going. The kinetic energy transferred into heat and force, creating a massive explosion as the projectile tore through deck after deck. The second slug hit 3 meters away, then the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. The Kresh ship's hull erupted in 6 places. Atmosphere vented into space. Internal explosions rippled through the vessel as systems overloaded and power conduits ruptured. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition stores cooked off. Direct hit, Dan Foster reported calmly. Target 1's shields are down and hull integrity is failing. The other human ships added their firepower. The cruiser Vanguard fired a full spread of missiles. These were not simple explosives. Each missile was tipped with a small nuclear warhead. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction, and they brought all that knowledge to space. The missiles streaked toward the crippled Kresh ship. Point defense systems tried to shoot them down, destroying 3 of the 8 missiles. The other 5 got through. 5 nuclear detonations bloomed in space, each one a miniature sun. The Kresh ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, badly damaged but still intact. The next moment it was expanding debris and radioactive dust. Target 1 destroyed, Captain Nick Torres reported over the comm. His voice was steady and professional. The remaining 2 Kresh ships were reacting now. They had expected an easy fight against weak humans. Instead, they had just watched one of their warships die in less than 30 seconds. War Master Thok's ship, the largest of the 3, began to turn. Its weapons ports opened and plasma cannons swung toward the human fleet. Incoming fire, Kate Palmer warned. Multiple plasma bolts and missiles heading our way. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered. Return fire. Amy's hands moved across her navigation controls with practiced skill. The Resolute rolled and accelerated, changing vectors to avoid the incoming fire. Most of the Kresh weapons missed by wide margins. A few plasma bolts hit the ship's shields, making them flare bright blue. But the shields held easily. The human ships were smaller than the Kresh warships, but they were also faster and more maneuverable. Earth's engineers had learned from centuries of naval warfare. Speed and agility could be just as valuable as heavy armor. The second Kresh ship tried to flee. Its engines flared bright as it attempted to build up enough speed to jump to faster than light travel. Target 2 is running, Ryan observed. Not for long, Jake replied. Signal the Liberty and the Defender. Take it down. 2 of the human cruisers broke formation and went after the fleeing Kresh ship. The Liberty, commanded by Captain Mike Chen, was the fastest ship in the fleet. It accelerated hard, closing the distance rapidly. Liberty to Resolute, Mike Chen's voice came over the comm.
We have target lock.
Firing missiles. A dozen missiles launched from the Liberty, followed by another dozen from the Defender. The Kresh ship's point defenses worked frantically, shooting down missile after missile, but there were too many, coming from too many angles. 4 missiles got through the defenses and detonated against the Kresh ship's hull. The explosions tore massive holes in the armor. The ship's engine sputtered and died. Dead in space, the Kresh vessel tried to bring its weapons to bear. The Liberty and Defender closed in, firing their railguns at point-blank range. Solid slugs hammered the crippled ship from both sides. The Kresh vessel broke apart under the assault, splitting into 3 large pieces that continued to drift apart. Target 2 eliminated, Captain Chen reported. That left only War Master Thok's ship. It was the largest of the 3, and sensor readings showed it held most of the Velhari prisoners. We need to be careful with this one, Jake said. Those hostages are somewhere inside. We can't just blow it apart. Agreed, Ryan said. We need to board it, Jake nodded. It was the only way. Amy, take us in close. Dan, target their engines and weapons, but nothing that might harm the cargo holds. We're going to disable this ship and then send in the Marines. The Resolute and Vanguard moved in on Thok's ship from 2 directions. Plasma fire from the Kresh vessel splashed against their shields. The human ships returned fire with precision strikes targeting specific systems. Railgun slugs took out the Kresh engines one by one. Missile strikes destroyed weapon emplacements. The human ships moved like surgeons, cutting away the Kresh vessel's ability to fight or flee without destroying it completely. Sensors show the target is dead in space, Kate reported. They still have life support and emergency power, but they can't maneuver or fire weapons. Good, Jake said. He opened a channel to the Marine Bay. Sergeant Claire Mitchell, you're up. Take your team and secure those prisoners. Rules of engagement: any Kresh warrior is a hostile target. Put them down hard and fast. Understood, Commander. Claire's voice came back. My team is ready. We'll bring those people home. Down in the Marine Bay, Sergeant Claire Mitchell checked her gear one last time. She was a compact woman with short dark hair and sharp eyes. She had served in the Marines for 10 years and had seen combat on 3 different worlds. But this was different. This time they were fighting to save children. Listen up, she called to her squad. 20 Marines in powered armor stood ready. We're going into that ship to extract hostages. The Kresh are experienced fighters. They're strong, fast, and they won't hesitate to kill you. But remember your training. We're faster, smarter, and we have better equipment. She activated her helmet and the powered armor sealed around her. Our mission is simple. Get in, secure the hostages, neutralize any threats, and get out. No heroics. We work as a team. Everyone comes home. Everyone! Yes, ma'am! The Marines responded in unison. The boarding craft detached from the Resolute. It was a small armored shuttle designed specifically for hostile insertions. It accelerated toward the Kresh ship, dodging small debris from the earlier battle. Approaching target, the pilot called back. 30 seconds to contact, Claire checked her weapon. It was a compact rifle that fired armor-piercing rounds. Her suit also carried grenades, a combat knife, and a small medical kit. Everything a Marine needed to fight and survive. The boarding craft hit the Kresh ship's hull with a solid thump. Cutting charges activated immediately. Burning through the thick armor plating, molten metal dripped into the Kresh ship's interior. After 10 seconds, the charges blew a large hole in the hull. Go, 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 Claire shouted. The Marines poured through the breach. They found themselves in a dark corridor lit by emergency lights. The air was thick and smelled like rotting meat. "Spread out," Claire ordered. 2-person teams. Watch your corners. The Marines moved through the ship with practiced efficiency. Their armor was painted dark gray and had advanced sensors built into the helmets. They could see in the dark, detect heat signatures, and coordinate their movements through linked computers. The first Kresh warrior appeared from a side corridor, roaring a challenge. He was huge, covered in thick scales and wielding a plasma rifle. 2 Marines fired simultaneously. Their armor-piercing rounds hit the Kresh warrior center mass. The powerful bullets punched through his natural armor and dropped him instantly. "Contact," one of the Marines reported calmly. "Target neutralized." More Kresh warriors appeared, responding to the alarm. The corridors erupted in violence. Plasma bolts splashed against Marine armor. Bullets tore through Kresh flesh. Flash grenades exploded, blinding and disorienting the defenders. The Kresh were natural predators. They were strong enough to tear apart most species with their bare claws. They had sharp teeth and thick armor that protected them from most weapons. They had been raiding and fighting for generations, but they had never faced human Marines before. Human soldiers trained constantly. They drilled until complex tactics became muscle memory. They used overwhelming firepower and coordinated team movements. Most importantly, they came from a world where everything tried to kill them. They knew how to fight dirty. A Kresh warrior lunged at Corporal Jake Norton, claws extended. Jake didn't try to match the alien's strength. Instead, he sidestepped and fired 3 rounds into the Kresh's knee joint. The warrior fell, and Jake put 2 more rounds through his skull. "Moving up," Jake called to his partner. The Marines advanced through the ship, clearing room by room. The Kresh fought with desperation, knowing they would get no mercy. They were right. Claire's team reached a sealed blast door. "This is it," she said, checking her sensors. "I'm reading multiple life signs on the other side. Velhari signatures. Charges ready," one Marine said, placing explosives on the door. "Everyone back," Claire ordered. The Velhari survivors filled 3 cargo bays on the Resolute. They sat in small groups wrapped in emergency blankets while Dr. Ben Carter and his medical team moved among them. Some had broken bones. Others had cuts and bruises. All of them looked shocked and exhausted. Kelly Wright, one of the nurses, knelt beside a small Velhari child. The little one couldn't have been more than 5 years old in human terms. She was crying softly, her large eyes wet with tears. "Hey there," Kelly said gently. "It's okay now. You're safe." The child looked up at her with fear. Kelly slowly reached out and took the child's small hand. She began to sing quietly, a simple lullaby her own mother had sung to her long ago. The melody was soft and soothing. Gradually, the Velhari child's crying stopped. She leaned against Kelly, exhausted, and closed her eyes. Kelly continued singing, rocking the child gently. Around the cargo bay, other crew members were doing similar things, offering comfort to the traumatized survivors. Jake stood at the entrance to the cargo bay, watching. Amy came to stand beside him. "They're going to need a lot of help," Amy said quietly. "They've been through hell." "I know," Jake replied. "But at least they're alive. That's something." An older Velhari approached them slowly. He was tall for his species, with gray fur around his face. He walked with dignity despite the bandage around his chest. "Commander Harris?" the Velhari asked in careful Galactic common. "Yes," Jake said. "And you are?" "I am Elder Venna. I was the leader of those who traveled on the Luminous Hope." The old Velhari's voice was sad. "I must thank you for saving us. We thought we would die, or worse, be slaves forever." "You don't need to thank us," Jake said. "We're just glad we got here in time to save some of you." Elder Venna's large eyes filled with tears. "Not all of us. So many died when the Kresh attacked. They killed anyone who tried to resist. They took the strongest and healthiest as slaves and left the rest to die in space." "I'm sorry," Jake said, and he meant it. "But you came," Elder Venna said. "When we sent that distress call, we did not really expect anyone to answer. The Galactic Council has rules about interfering. Most species would have ignored our plea. But you came. You fought for us. You risked your lives for people you barely know. That's what we do," Amy said simply. "We protect those who can't protect themselves." Elder Venna looked at them both with wonder. "We have heard the stories about humans. Other species say you are dangerous, that you come from a death world that made you into fierce warriors. They say we should fear you, but I see only kindness in your eyes." Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. We did what anyone should have done, but they didn't, Elder Venna said firmly. No one else came. Only you. He paused, then added, Commander, there is something you must know. The Luminous Hope was not the only ship the Kresh attacked. Jake felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? The Kresh raided our home colony 6 days ago. They came with many ships and overwhelming force. We had no weapons, no way to defend ourselves. They took nearly 5,000 of our people. Elder Venna's voice broke. The Luminous Hope was just one transport ship. There are 3 more, all carrying Velhari prisoners to Kresh space. Thousands of my people are still in their hands. Amy and Jake exchanged glances. 3 more ships, thousands more prisoners. Do you know where these ships are going? Jake asked. The Kresh spoke among themselves. They did not think we could understand their language, but I studied it years ago. Elder Venna closed his eyes, remembering. They spoke of taking us to their fortress moon, a place where they keep all their slaves. They called it Kresh Tar. Jake called an emergency meeting in the conference room. His senior officers gathered around the table. Elder Venna was there too, along with another Velhari named Senna who had overheard the Kresh talking. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Ryan said, looking at the data on his tablet. The Kresh Dominion has been raiding peaceful species for 200 years. They operate a massive slave empire across 12 star systems, and the Galactic Council knows about this but does nothing. The Council says it cannot interfere in the cultural practices of member species, Elder Venna explained. The Kresh argue that slavery is part of their culture. The Council debates and holds meetings, but nothing changes. That's insane, Dan Foster said angrily. They just let this happen? The Council values order and non-interference above all else, Senna said quietly. They fear that taking action against the Kresh would set a precedent. Other species might be next. Lieutenant Gary Webb, the intelligence officer, pulled up a star map. I've been analyzing the data we recovered from the Kresh ships we destroyed. The Velhari are right. The Kresh have a massive operation. They've raided 47 different civilizations. They always target peaceful species with no military capability. He highlighted several systems on the map. And it gets worse. The Kresh don't just use slaves for labor. They sell them to other species. There's an entire black market for slaves in this part of the galaxy. The room went silent. Everyone was processing this information. Captain Nick Torres spoke up via video link from the Vanguard. So what do we do about it? We saved these 50 Velhari, but there are thousands more out there. Are we just going to let them suffer? No, Jake said firmly. He looked around at his officers. I know what you're all thinking. This is bigger than us. We're just one small fleet. We should report this to Earth Command and let them decide what to do. But, Amy prompted, but those 3 transport ships are carrying Velhari prisoners right now. By the time we report this and Earth decides on a course of action, those ships will reach Kresh space. Those people will disappear into the Kresh slave system and we might never find them. You want to go after them, Ryan said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Jake admitted. I know it's not our official mission. I know the Galactic Council will probably condemn us, but I can't just sit here knowing we could save those people. Dr. Ben Carter leaned forward. Commander, I support you completely, but you need to be realistic. We're 5 ships. The Kresh Dominion is huge. Even if we save the Velhari, what about all the other slaves? What about the other species the Kresh will raid in the future? I know, Jake said. That's why I'm going to request authorization from Earth Command for an extended operation. Not just to save the Velhari, but to dismantle the Kresh slave network completely. The room erupted in excited conversation. It was an ambitious plan, maybe even crazy. But everyone in that room had seen the survivors in the cargo bay. They had seen the children crying for their lost parents. They had seen the broken bodies floating in space. Sir, Amy said, if Earth approves this, we're going to need more than 5 ships. I agree, Jake said. I'll request reinforcements. But in the meantime, we can't wait. Those 3 transport ships need to be stopped before they reach Kresh space. Gary Webb pulled up more data. Based on the information Elder Venna provided and the data from the Kresh computers, I've calculated the most likely route for those transport ships. They're moving slowly because they're hauling prisoners. If we move fast, we can intercept them. How long do we have? Jake asked. 3 days, maybe 4. After that, they'll be in heavily defended Kresh territory. It will be much harder to get to them. Jake looked at each of his officers in turn. I'm not going to order anyone to do this. This is beyond our original mission. If anyone wants to object, speak now. I'll note your objection in the log and there will be no consequences. No one spoke. Finally, Ryan smiled slightly. Sir, with respect, you're stuck with us. We all signed up to protect the innocent. Those Velhari are innocent. Those other slaves the Kresh are holding are innocent. If we don't help them, who will? The council won't like it? Pete Morrison said from his position at the end of the table. They'll probably call us barbarians and warmongers. Let them, Jake said. I'd rather be called a barbarian and know I did the right thing than be called civilized while innocent people suffer. He stood up. I'm going to send a message to Earth Command requesting authorization and reinforcements. In the meantime, we're going after those transport ships. Pete, I need the fleet ready to move in 6 hours. Gary, I need everything you can learn about Kresh ship movements and defensive positions. Ben, make sure the medical bay is ready for more survivors. Everyone nodded and stood to leave. Before they could go, Jake added one more thing. I'm also going to send a message on all Galactic Council frequencies. I want every species in this sector to know what's happening. No more secrets. No more looking the other way. 2 hours later, Jake sat in his quarters recording his message. The small camera focused on his face as he spoke clearly and calmly. This is Commander Jake Harris of the human vessel Resolute. We recently responded to a distress call from a Velhari ship under attack by the Kresh Dominion. When we arrived, we found a massacre. 300 innocent people were killed or taken as slaves. We engaged the Kresh raiders and rescued 50 survivors, including children. He paused, letting that information sink in for anyone who might be listening. During our investigation, we discovered that the Kresh Dominion operates a massive slave empire. They have been raiding peaceful civilizations for 200 years, taking thousands of innocent people as property. The Galactic Council is aware of this situation but has taken no action. The response from Earth Command came faster than Jake expected. Admiral Patricia Moore herself appeared on the screen in his quarters. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen decades of military service. Commander Harris, she said without preamble, I've reviewed your report and your request. I've also listened to the message you broadcast to the galaxy. Jake waited, unsure what her response would be. Your actions were bold. Some might even call them reckless. Admiral Moore paused. I call them exactly what humanity needs to be doing out here. Authorization granted for extended operations against the Kresh Dominion. Reinforcements are being assembled and will reach you within 2 weeks. In the meantime, you are cleared to intercept those transport ships and liberate any prisoners you find. Jake felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet, Commander. You've just started a war. The Galactic Council is already sending complaints. They're calling you a rogue element and demanding your recall. Admiral Moore smiled slightly. I told them to file their complaints properly and we'll review them in about 6 months. Maybe longer. What about diplomatic consequences? Jake asked. Let me worry about the diplomats. You focus on getting those people home safely. Admiral Moore's expression grew serious. But Harris, be careful. The Kresh have been doing this for 200 years. They're good at it. Don't underestimate them. I won't, Admiral. One more thing. Your message to the galaxy has caused quite a stir. We're getting communications from dozens of species. Some are angry, calling us warmongers. But others, she paused, others are thanking us. Species that have lost people to Kresh raids. They're sending us intelligence, offering support, asking us to help their people too. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was bigger than just saving the Velhari now. We'll do our best, Admiral. I know you will. Good luck, Commander. Godspeed. The transmission ended. Jake returned to the bridge where his officers were already preparing for the hunt. Gary Webb had tracked down the likely route of the 3 Kresh transport ships. They're moving slowly, Gary explained, pointing at the star map. The ships are old and heavily loaded. Based on their current speed and heading, they should pass through the system in about 40 hours. That's where we'll be waiting, Jake said. Amy, plot an intercept course. We need to get there before they do and set up an ambush. Already working on it, Amy replied. The 5 human ships left the battlefield behind, carrying the 50 rescued Velhari with them. Elder Venna asked to stay on the bridge during the journey. He wanted to see how humans fought. We are a peaceful people, he told Jake as they traveled through space. We do not understand war or violence, but watching you and your crew, I am beginning to understand why sometimes force is necessary. You do not fight because you enjoy it. You fight because others cannot. That's right, Jake said. We're not perfect. Humans have done terrible things in our history. We've fought wars against each other, made mistakes, hurt innocent people, but we've learned from those mistakes. We've learned that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. The fleet reached the intercept point with 12 hours to spare. Jake positioned his ships carefully, hiding them among a cluster of asteroids that would mask their energy signatures. "Now we wait," Ryan said. The waiting was hard. Every minute felt like an hour. The crew stayed at their stations, ready to respond instantly when the crash ships appeared. Finally, Kate Palmer's sensors detected something. "I've got 3 large vessels entering the system. They match the profile of crash transport ships." "Battle stations," Jake ordered quietly. "Everyone stay calm and wait for my signal." The 3 crash ships moved slowly through space, unaware that human warships were tracking their every movement. They were huge vessels designed to carry large cargo loads. Their hulls were reinforced with heavy armor, but they were slow and not very maneuverable. "I'm detecting life signs on all 3 ships," Kate reported. "Lots of them. It matches Velhari biology. I'd estimate 1,500 people per ship." Jake did the math quickly. 4,500 Velhari, all held prisoner on those 3 ships. If they could save them all, combined with the 50 they'd already rescued, that would be nearly 5,000 people returned to their families. "Wait for them to get closer," Jake said. "I want to hit all 3 at once. They can't escape and they can't harm the prisoners." The crash ships continued their slow progress through the system. They were confident, expecting no trouble. After all, who would dare attack the crash Dominion? "Now," Jake said calmly. 5 human warships appeared from behind the asteroids, weapons already locked on target. The crash ships barely had time to react before the first strikes hit them. But this time the humans were more careful. They didn't want to destroy the ships. They wanted to capture them intact with all their prisoners safe. "Target their engines only," Jake ordered. "Precision strikes." "Dan, I want those ships disabled but not destroyed." Dan Foster worked his controls with expert precision. Railgun slugs fired in controlled bursts, targeting the transport ship's massive engines. The solid projectiles tore through the engine housings, destroying the power systems but leaving the main hulls intact. Within 2 minutes, all 3 crash ships were dead in space, unable to move or fight back. "Prepare boarding teams," Jake ordered. "I want Marines on all 3 ships simultaneously. Fast and efficient. Secure the prisoners and neutralize any crash crew who resist." This time, the boarding action went smoother. The crash crew on the transport ships were not warriors like War Master Thok's raiders. They were just ship crews used to bullying unarmed prisoners, not fighting trained soldiers. When the Marines broke through into the first ship's cargo hold, they found Velhari packed into cages just like before. But these prisoners looked even worse. They had been captive for 6 days now with minimal food and water. Many were sick. Some were dying. "Medical teams, get in here now." Sergeant Claire Mitchell called urgently. "We've got critical patients." Dr. Ben Carter and his teams rushed aboard with emergency equipment. They moved through the cargo holds, treating the worst cases first. Some of the Velhari were too far gone, dehydrated and weak. Ben and his people worked frantically to save everyone they could. Meanwhile, the Marines secured the ships. Most of the crash crew surrendered when they realized they were facing human soldiers. A few tried to fight and died quickly. By the end of the day, all 3 transport ships were under human control and all the prisoners were being moved to the human vessels for medical care. Elder Venna stood in the cargo bay of the Resolute, tears streaming down his face as he watched more of his people brought aboard. Families were reunited. Children found their parents. Adults wept with relief and joy. "You saved them," Elder Venna said to Jake. "You saved them all." "Not all," Jake replied sadly. "We lost some. They were too sick or injured. We couldn't save everyone, but you saved most. That is more than we dared hope for." Elder Venna gripped Jake's hand. "My people will never forget this. Never." Over the next week, the human fleet worked hard to care for their rescued passengers. Medical teams treated injuries and illnesses. Engineers repaired the Velhari transport ships enough to make them spaceworthy. The plan was to escort the Velhari home to their colony, but then the reinforcements arrived. 15 more human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and joined Jake's fleet. They brought Marines, medical supplies, weapons, and most importantly, specialized personnel for a longer campaign. Among the new arrivals was Captain Lisa Grant, Jake's former communications officer. She had been promoted and given her own ship. "Good to see you again, Commander," Lisa said when they met in the conference room. I hear you've been making quite a bit of noise out here. Just doing what needed to be done, Jake replied. Well, Earth Command agrees with you. They've authorized a full campaign against the Kresh Dominion. We're calling it Operation Liberation. The goal is to dismantle their entire slave network and free everyone they're holding. Gary Webb pulled up intelligence data on the main screen. We've been receiving information from multiple sources. Species that have suffered under Kresh raids are sending us everything they know. We've identified 12 major Kresh facilities across 8 star systems. The largest is their fortress moon, Kreshtar. That's where they keep most of their slaves and house their military command. That's our ultimate target, Lisa said. But we'll need to take down their other facilities first, free the slaves held there and gather more intelligence. It's going to be a long campaign. How long? Jake asked. Months probably, maybe longer. Lisa looked around at the gathered officers. Earth is in this for the long haul. We're not stopping until the Kresh Dominion is finished. Over the following months, Task Force Vengeance, as they came to be called, moved from system to system. They hit Kresh facilities with precision and overwhelming force. Each raid freed hundreds or thousands of slaves. Not just Velhari, but dozens of other species. Some Jake had heard of, some he hadn't. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans were keeping their promise. They were actually fighting to end slavery while the Galactic Council held endless debates. The Council formally censured humanity. They called the campaign illegal and demanded it stop immediately. 6 months after the fall of Kreshtar, Commander Jake Harris stood at the orbital station above Earth. He wore his dress uniform, uncomfortable in the formal clothes after spending so long in combat gear. The medal ceremony was being broadcast across both human space and the wider galaxy. But Jake wasn't thinking about medals. He was thinking about the people. Over 15,000 beings had been freed from Kresh slavery during the campaign. 15,000 lives returned to their families, their homes, their futures. Medical teams had treated them. Counselors had helped them process their trauma. Human ships had carried them back to their home worlds. Elder Venna stood beside Jake at the viewing window, looking down at the blue and green world below. The old Velhari's fur had more gray in it now, and he moved slower than before, but his eyes were bright. Your world is beautiful, Venna said softly. I can see why it made your people so strong. It challenges you, but it also nurtures you. It's home, Jake replied simply. Behind them, the ceremony was beginning. Admiral Patricia Moore was presenting commendations to the crews of Task Force Vengeance. There were a lot of names to read. Not everyone had survived the campaign. Jake thought about the fallen, the Marines who died storming Kresh facilities the crew members lost when ships took damage in battle. They died for strangers, Venna said, as if reading Jake's thoughts. They gave their lives to save people they had never met, from species they barely knew. There is no greater sacrifice. They died doing what they believed was right, Jake said. That's what matters. The ceremony continued. Medals were awarded. Speeches were given. But Jake was more interested in what came next. After the ceremony ended, a different kind of meeting took place. Representatives from over 40 different species had come to Earth. Not official ambassadors sent by the Galactic Council, but personal envoys from species that had been victims of Kresh raids. They gathered in a large conference room. Some looked like animals from Earth, evolved and intelligent. Others were completely alien, beings of crystal or living metal or pure energy. But they all had one thing in common. They had all suffered under slavery and oppression. A Xanthari representative, a being made of living crystal that refracted light into rainbows, spoke first. We gather here to thank humanity for what they have done, but also to ask what comes next. The Kresh Dominion is broken, but there are other threats in the galaxy, other species that prey on the weak. What will humanity do about them? Jake looked around the room. He had been promoted to admiral after the campaign ended, given command of a new branch of Earth's fleet. The Liberation Force, they called it. Its mission was exactly what the Xanthari was asking about. The Liberation Force will continue to operate, Jake said. We'll respond to distress calls from any species that needs help. We'll investigate reports of slavery, piracy, and other crimes against sentient beings, and will take action when necessary. The Galactic Council will not approve, a Lurian delegate said. The aquatic being's voice came through a translation device. They already condemn your actions. They say you are setting a dangerous precedent, that you are interfering in the natural order of things. The natural order? Ryan Beck, who had also been promoted and now served as Jake's second in command, spoke up. There's nothing natural about slavery, nothing natural about preying on the defenseless. The Council can disapprove all they want. We're not stopping. Ambassador Helen Grant, who had flown in from the Galactic Council chambers, stood up. Let me be clear about Earth's position. We respect the Council's role in maintaining peace and facilitating communication between species. But we will not stand by while innocent beings suffer because of bureaucratic protocols. We tried working within the Council's system. We saw how that worked out. She pulled up images on the screen, showing the freed slaves from Kreshtar, the destroyed Velhari ship, the children crying in cages. This is what the Council's non-interference policy looks like in practice. We reject it. Humanity will act according to our own moral code. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. A small furry alien that looked somewhat like a rabbit stood up nervously. But what if humanity becomes like the Kresh? What if you decide to conquer instead of liberate? What if your power corrupts you? It was a fair question. Jake had thought about it many times during the campaign. That's a risk, Jake admitted. Power can corrupt. History on our own world shows that clearly. That's why the Liberation Force will operate under strict oversight. Earth's government, independent observers, and representatives from the species we help will all have the authority to review our actions. We'll be transparent about what we do and why. More importantly, Amy Sullivan added, we're not interested in conquest. We have our own worlds to worry about, our own problems to solve. We're not looking to build an empire. We just want to make sure that when someone cries for help, someone answers. The Xanthari's crystalline body chimed softly, their equivalent of a thoughtful pause. Many of our species would like to join this effort. We may not be warriors like humans, but we can contribute in other ways. Intelligence gathering, medical aid, diplomatic support. We welcome that, Jake said. This can't be just a human operation. It should be a coalition of species who believe that the strong should protect the weak. Over the next hour, they discussed the details. Several species committed to joining the Liberation Force. The Velhari offered to establish an intelligence network, using their contacts across the galaxy to gather information about threats and distress situations. The Xanthari promised medical support, as their crystalline technology was excellent for healing. Others offered ships, supplies, or personnel. By the end of the meeting, the foundation for something new had been laid. Not an empire, not a conquest, but a genuine alliance based on shared values. As the representatives left, Elder Venna remained behind with Jake. There is something I must tell you, the old Velhari said. When my people first met humans, we were afraid. We had heard the stories. The death world that breeds monsters. The predators who conquered their own planet and reached for the stars. We thought you would be dangerous, violent, aggressive. He looked at Jake with those large, gentle eyes. We were right. You are dangerous. You are capable of terrible violence. But we learned something else. You are also capable of great compassion. You use your strength to protect, not to dominate. You fight not because you enjoy it, but because others cannot. That is what makes you truly remarkable. Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes during this campaign. People died because of decisions I made. Yes, Venna agreed. But you made those decisions trying to save lives, not take them. You risked your own people to save strangers. That is what matters. The galaxy needed to learn what humanity truly is. Not monsters from a death world, but guardians who remember what it means to be vulnerable. They stood together at the viewing window, looking out at Earth. The planet turned slowly below them. Blue oceans and green continents visible through white clouds. It was a beautiful world, but also a harsh one. A world that had forged humanity in fire and struggle. What will you do now? Venna asked. There's already another distress call, Jake said. A mining colony on the edge of explored space. Pirates are harassing them, taking their supplies and people. The colony doesn't have any defenses. Will you go? Of course. That's what we do now. Jake smiled slightly. The Resolute is being refitted for the mission. We leave in 3 days. Then I will return to my people and tell them the good news. The Velhari you saved are home now, reunited with their families. They speak of nothing but the humans who came when no one else would. Venna placed a gentle hand on Jake's arm. You have made friends for life, Admiral Harris. If humanity ever needs help, the Velhari will answer your call, just as you answered ours. 3 days later, the Resolute departed from Earth orbit. The ship had been repaired and upgraded during the refit. New weapons, better shields, improved sensors, but the crew was mostly the same. Amy at navigation, Ryan as first officer, Kate at sensors, Dan at weapons, Pete in engineering, Ben in medical. They had become more than just colleagues. They were a family forged in combat and united by purpose. As Earth shrank in the viewing screen, Jake sat in his command chair and thought about everything that had happened. It had started with a simple distress call, a plea for help from a peaceful species under attack. He could have ignored it, followed the rules, stayed safe, but he hadn't. None of them had. They had answered that call and changed everything. The Galactic Council was still angry. They had passed multiple resolutions condemning humanity's actions. They had threatened sanctions and diplomatic isolation. But those threats rang hollow when dozens of species were privately thanking Earth for doing what the Council wouldn't. Some Council members were already calling for reforms. The debate about the Prime Directive had been reopened. Maybe in time the rules would change. Maybe other species would follow humanity's example. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe humans would stand alone. But that was okay. They had stood alone before. Course plotted for the mining colony, Amy reported. We should arrive in 4 days. Take us out, Lieutenant, Jake ordered. The Resolute accelerated away from Earth, heading back into the vast,